In the darkest shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read ancient tomes. The order of the Abercast. We are the brave and bold.
Stigmata Studios presents The Scorpion Strikes. In this comic book, a terrorist called the Scorpion is transported to a secret CIA prison. He quickly turns the tables on the guards and administrators and releases the prisoners. A well-armed anarchist called Constituent Zero assembles a team and fights to take the prison back. The story is a dark political action thriller. The Scorpion's actions set the stage perfectly for the Jin Jihad. Available on Indie Planet. Get more info on The Scorpion Strikes, the Jin Jihad, and other titles at stigmatastudios.com. Stigmata Studios presents The Test of the Scorpion. In this comic book, while the Jin Jihad is raging on one side of the city, the terrorist called the Scorpion sets a secondary attack in motion as he obtains a small tactical nuclear bomb. A mysterious, ever-living warrior called Cyrus the Dead Guy steps forward to test the faith of the Scorpion and his lunatic followers. This is an action-adventure story. It's a bit of swashbuckler that wraps up the Jihad stories. Available on Indie Planet. Get more info on The Scorpion Strikes, the Jin Jihad, The Test of the Scorpion, and other titles at stigmatastudios.com.
I'm just saying, if I were Osama bin Laden, he's a very smart guy. I spent a lot of time thinking about him, and I nearly got him once. And I could have killed him. But I would have had to destroy a little town called Kandahar in Afghanistan and kill 300 innocent women and children. And then I would have been no better than him. And so I didn't do it. William Jefferson Clinton, September 10th, 2001. Do 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 boo do boo. Bada bada ba 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 ba. American, not American, I'm a spring-loaded mother with an evil slant. I am the boogeyman. Top of my hand. This motherfucking... There we go.
The Abercast. Occult. History. Conspiracy. Violence.
All right, welcome to the Abercast. I'm John. Last week we talked about the Munich Massacre in 1972 and the subsequent Operation Wrath of God, where the Israelis went and flipped some light switches on some terrorists. So this episode kind of links into that in some ways. It actually kind of links into a lot of the stuff that we've talked about, which is quite telling, I think. As you look through the catalog of these last 50 episodes. I want to tell you real quick, I checked out iTunes and I'm very disappointed in you. Your mother and I are very disappointed in you because there's no new iTunes rating reviews. So let's get on it punks. Revenge in a Saloon Called Hell is at the printers right now. I got my final proof. I'm ready to go. I'm rolling it, homie. And if you guys sign up for the newsletter, there's a link in the show notes. This week, I will send you a free digital copy of the comic book. So get to it. Get to it. You want to see it. Basically, it is a spaghetti western. It's an open letter it's an open love letter to Sergio Leone. It's a spaghetti western style yarn of a guy who feels that his life has been ruined by a fallen archangel and a demon lord. And he figures out a way to travel to hell and to take his revenge. It's a vengeance story, everybody. It's actually called Revenge in a Saloon Called Hell. So if you want to check that out for free, just sign into the newsletter. You could sign out the next fucking day if you're a prick. But go ahead and sign on to it. We don't bust you guys' balls with the newsletter. As a matter of fact, it takes me like 8 fucking months to do anything with it anyways. I just want to share this book with you guys if you're interested in it, but don't feel like dropping a few dimes to get it. So check it out. It's a first chapter of my upcoming monument to my insanity that's coming out. The whole thing's called Rise of the Beast. This is chapter 1. So if you guys want to check it out, please sign into the newsletter. If not, we're going to move on very fast. I mentioned iTunes, that you guys are slacking on that. So there's other ways to support the show. You can buy a book. You can sign into the newsletter. That's 2 great ones right there. You can rate and review. That's 3 great ones right there. And right now, any of those, 2 of those 3 things don't cost you anything. You can share it on social media. That doesn't cost you anything either. Yeah, so go ahead and do all that stuff. Chances are, if you like the stuff that we talk about here, or if you like the stuff that I write about in my comic books, you probably know another lunatic or 2 that might enjoy the show. So share with them. Don't be embarrassed. Share with them. You can even tell them that I twisted your arm and made you do it. So, tonight we're going to tackle one of my pet peeves. I have a big pet peeve with 9/11 people, like truther people, but we're not going to get into much into 9/11 tonight, but have a problem especially with conspiracy people, because they see some wild shit, yo. I'm not talking about the mini nuclear devices that were hidden on the floors, or how the building was designed to fall down to make a magic ritual, or it was a directed energy weapon from Alaska or outer space. I'm not even getting into that shit right now. I'm talking about this attitude where people go like, what, you really believe like 19 dudes with box cutters can do this? And I say, no, that's not what I believe. There's so much more going on than just 19 fucking dudes from Saudi Arabia stumbling into America to take over a bunch of planes with box cutters. There's so much more than that. Or like, what, did we invade Iraq for oil, so on and so forth? No, actually, that's a Democratic. That's a Democrat Party thing. Going over there, we're gonna get into it, but yeah. The whole going over to the desert for oil, you could thank FDR for that. We're gonna get into that in a little bit. I don't want to blow too many gaskets right off the bat. I want to coax you in. I want to get you to come on in to my trap. No, but there's way more to 9/11 than 19 dudes with box cutters. And you guys know I like to add context to the stories that I tell on the show. So we're going to add context to the events of 9/11. That's what we're going to do this evening, is we're going to put the events of 9/11 into context. And actually, as I was writing this outline, I realized that I can't do this all at one time. So I don't know if you're going to have to wait another year before I do the next part of this. I'm not sure. We're just calling this 9/11 in context part 1 / the lead up. I might do this next week. I don't know. I'm a little 9/11'd out after doing these copious notes and all this research. So we'll see. It's a mixed bag. We've been beating up on Muslims for 2 weeks in a row now, so maybe we'll go on to something else. I'm not sure. I gotta rearrange this. I gotta get a lubrication. So, yeah. So what I want you to do is I want you to mix up a couple gin jihads, and I want you to throw them into the symbols of America's material dominance. Because we're going to get elbow deep into putting 9/11 in context. So when I mean put stuff into context, what exactly I'm talking about? Well, this thing right here, this fucking thing, I'm gonna start at the date, September 11th, and I think that this date is important, and this is why. Because in September 11th, 1683, the Ottoman Empire sieged the golden apple of Europe. At the time, it is called Vienna. You can actually, I wrote a whole book about this called Vienna, 1683. The Ottoman Empire was the closest thing to a caliphate that's ever been. Now, caliphate, for you guys that don't know, is what Muslims call when they are going to rule the world. That's their whole mission in life. In some thinkings or whatever of the religion, it's written in the law to take over the whole world. That's what they're going to do. They're going to take over the whole world. And this Ottoman Empire was the closest thing that they got to it. And in 1683, they sent a lot of soldiers, a lot of material, a lot of weapons into Vienna to take the city. And this guy, Count Ernest Rudiger von Stromberg, and the King of Poland, King Jan Sobieski III, rallied, and the Count von Stromberg held the city. It was like they had dudes that they sent emissaries that were like, look, dude, we've been doing this for like 25 days now. Like, why don't you just give up the city? You guys don't even have to convert. You could just, just pay more taxes or whatever. Just let us come through. Everything will be fine. And the Count von Stromberg was like, go fuck yourselves. He was a bit of a dandy. I'm going to do a whole episode on this because, like I said, I wrote a whole book on it. I'm just kind of glossing over it right now because that's where my story of September 11th starts, 1683. And what he didn't know was at the time, Jan Sobieski III had assembled the largest cavalry. Well, I don't know if it's the largest cavalry ever, but they took the plains to the east, and they did the largest cavalry charge in history down to break this Ottoman line, and they crushed it, bro, crushed it. And these guys, they're not just dudes on horses. Like I say, it's like the Polish king with the cavalry, and you guys think there's a bunch of Polacks riding down. Well, that's true. I mean, the Polacks were fucking awesome soldiers and crazy warriors, but these guys were called the Flying Hussars. And they were called this because they rode horses down, like the cavalry. That's what cavalry does. They ride horses. But the armor that these hussars had, they had like not fake. They had decorative wings built onto this armor, and they had these face masks like birds or angels, and they rode down. Like I said, it was the biggest cavalry charge ever. Like you think of like I don't know, like Waterloo, or you think of like a cavalry charge wherever else it might be. It was like 3 times the size of it. It was this gigantic cavalry charge of these fucking Eastern European men with swords and lances and spears riding down on these pissed fucking horses, and they had wings, and they were coming down to skewer you. So what happened is they were sieging the city, right? So they were all around the walls, and they did a double envelop. So they had like 2 rings around the wall. And these guys just blasted through. They fucking crippled these Ottoman Turks. They fucking crushed them. The guy that was in charge of them ran home. He ran home and he got, as a punishment for his defeat, because they were like, what do you need? This is what I need. Great. Here it is. Take 2 of everything that you need. There's no excuse if you can't beat this. Well, what they're not thinking of is they're not thinking of this Count von Stromberg, who is like, he is kind of like a dandy. When you see like drawings and stuff of him, you're like, this guy's got pretty good fashion sense. He reminds me of like a Billy D. Williams of the Vienna of 1683. He's kind of like a, hey, well, what do we have here? He's twisting his little snidely whiplash mustache. Meanwhile, you got Jan Sobieski III on his gigantic fucking horses riding in. Like, I'm just gonna fucking eat some of these dudes. And that's what they do. They just ram through. They destroy them. This is the blow that the Ottoman Empire was never able to return from. It took them a long time to die, but they withered from this moment on. I mean, they like lasted, like they were like a power, like quote power unquote, like no, really, they were like a power in World War One, like in the 1910s, but they were never the same after this. They died on the vine. It was the decline of the caliphate, that's for sure. Then let's see what happened. 1886, the car is born. 1903, the first official sustained controlled flight, Kitty Hawk. Well, this is actually wrong. It was in early 1901, maybe 1902. I have to check with John Shulkowski, but there's actually a guy in Pittsburgh that flew before the Wright brothers did. But this is the official. We're doing the official timeline here. So Kitty Hawk, Wright brothers, 1903. In 1916, the first tank used in combat. It was designed and used to try to break the stalemate at the Battle of the Somme. We're going to get into the Battle of the Somme some later episode as well. Fascinating. 1926, an English engineer, A. Griffith, published a paper on compressors and turbines, basically inventing the jet engine. It would take a couple years to develop it, but this is the guy who fucking did it. So if you can understand what I'm talking about here, this is it. The world is becoming driven on petro fuel. So if you want to be a world power, what do you got to do? You have to be able to have access to oil, gasoline. So what happens? I need to February 20th, 1945. On the way home from the Yalta Convention, liberal Uber president FDR meets with the Saudi king Abdulaziz. And they strike an agreement for U.S. preferential interest in oil for protection. So Saudi Arabia was like, I'll give you the first chuck at every bit of oil you want if you promise to protect us from anyone who would draw their swords to Saudi Arabia. And I would like to point out that FDR said, yes, from his wheelchair, yes, we'll do that. 1950, airliners are introduced. 1957, Osama bin Laden was born. And when he was 10 years old, an American pilot killed his father in a plane crash. That's terrible enough. But especially if you think about how ironic it is that because he goes on to search for father figures everywhere. This guy, he goes on to get like 3 or 4 father figures. So this guy's searching for father figures because the father that he had died in a plane crash when there was an American pilot. Da-dum. Ba-boom, boom. So also, the other thing about this is his dad his dad was super rich, and he like controlled a bunch of construction companies, or maybe just one big one. I don't fucking know. But Islamic law says you can have 4 wives if you could provide for them all. So this guy was like, yeah, I can have 4 wives at a time. And he rotated through them. So like, actually Osama's mother, I think, was from Syria, and she was feisty, and he didn't really dig her. He was like, you're not submissive enough for me or whatever. So he had one kid with her and then like kind of divorced her, and he named her, I can't remember what the name, like the Islamic name or the Arabic name is, but basically it was the slave. He called her the slave, and he called him, Osama bin Laden, the son of the slave. So you could see how this guy could kind of develop a father figure fixation. Like, he probably needs a new one, and like one with like a fuzzy sweater, and didn't believe in slaves. Then that might be good for him. 1973, we're doing a big jump from 1957 to 1973. 1973, the World Trade Centers are built. I hate to tell you this, but they were not built with ports for mini nuclear weapons. They were not built with some kind of holes in the side where you could run det cord up super easily for explosive charges. They were just built. And you can watch videos of these guys building these things, and it always kind of makes my nuts crawl up into my chest when I see them, because they're like, it's like they're balancing precariously on like a piece of steel that's being raised by a chain somewhere, and they're all just like, they look like they're super confident with it. And I'm like, God damn it. Whatever. Like, I used to jump off of like wrestling rings and stuff onto people, like with like barbed wire and like pointy sticks and stuff. It never bothered me. But in my old age, I'm worried about the heights. I don't know what it is. I'm worried about the heights, everybody. Where am I at? 1978, Afghanistan. The People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan. So whenever you read something like this, whenever you run across an organization called the People's Democratic Party of the blank, what you're dealing with is a bunch of commies. And it's a universal role. They seized power, and a civil war ensues between the commies and these Muslims. And they formed what's called the Mujahideen. And eventually the Soviets sent troops in, and they sent tanks and all this stuff in for support of their troops. And the Mujahideen started talking about, they started using unconventional warfare on them. All right, so our next step in this, putting all this stuff into context, I told you it reached back to a long time, everybody. So our next step is 1979. We're getting into my purview now. There was the Camp David Accords, where the president of Egypt, Anwar al-Sadat, and this is Israeli prime minister, they signed a treaty, and this Egyptian president was like, I will observe Israel's right to exist. And it just drove these fucking Muslims bananas. Iran was thrown into, with the help of Jimmy Carter, Iran was thrown into turmoil. And the Shah was overthrown, and radical Islamic leader Ayatollah Khomeini had taken over as leader. He was a leader of the revolution. And what this really showed is that Islamic, these Islamic freedom fighters at the time, is what they were seen as. These Islamic jihadis, these Wahhabists, were able to take on a government and, wind up installing a government where they could rule themselves. And this echoes through this kind of golden age. You know, I guess they probably see it as some kind of golden age. It actually is like an age of piss and fire for everybody else. And then 1979, there was these mecha revolutionaries that met a bloody end. They were killed in the square. 81, Reagan's first term. He sees Afghanistan. He is looking at Afghanistan, and he was like, "Hey, you know, this kind of can be the Soviets' version of Vietnam." And he started to support the Mujahideen. Now, Mujahideen. This is actually where Frank Herbert got the idea of the Fremen. I can't remember what their... Yeah, it was the Fremen. Yeah, they were the ones that lived in the desert. And it kind of sounds like Mujahideen. This first thing he wrote, it was like the path to Dune or the trail to Dune or something. It was all about like desert power and everything. It's actually really fascinating. Maybe I should do like a thing about the Middle East oil / water / the spice, because you know, he who controls the spice controls the universe. So global politics shift, and interests, you know, our interests usually stay the same. It's usually based on, you know, oil, because that's how our economy is powered. But global politics shift all the time, and we're going to see that over and over again in this thing. How one day one power is ruling, the next day another power is ruling, and how we support the power that wins, and then they flip on us, or vice versa, or the vice. However, it will end up working. So you find these guys, you know, out there, and they're like, well, you know, Osama bin Laden worked for the CIA at one point in time, and now he's fighting us. And you're like, yeah, that's the way the world works. You don't think that when Osama bin Laden worked for the CIA, if he ever did, asterisks, if he ever really worked for the CIA, if you think he worked for the CIA because he was working for the American way of life, you're fucked. Alliances are loosely threaded. The enemy of my enemy could be my friend, or you're working towards a common goal until something happens. So when people try to throw this shit in your face, and they're like, well, you know, haven't you ever seen Rambo 3, where Rambo joins the Taliban and he's fighting the Soviets? Yes, because we're fighting the Soviets, and the Taliban just happened to be there providing support. It's not like John J. Rambo from Arizona joined the Taliban, became a Muslim, and started fucking goats. Like, that's not what Rainbow 3 was about. Rainbow 3 was about, you know, it was like Return of the Jedi. They were like the little Ewoks. And John Rambo was like Luke Skywalker, and they beat the Soviets. That's how you should see it. But people will throw it in your face all the time. Like, oh, Reagan, so stupid. Look at him joining forces with the Taliban, or whatever it was called back then. You see what I'm saying? The point is that we were there to fight communism. We did it. That's what we were doing. At that point in time, this golden era of Islamism, radical Islamism, wasn't there. It wasn't a thing that was on our list that we should have been thinking of, apparently. All right, I'm veering off. I just did Star Wars and a Rambo mashup. Let me get back on my shit. Egypt, 1981. A fatwa was issued. Anwar el-Sadat. Now, this is the guy. This is the Egyptian. Just to recap, this is the Egyptian president that signed some kind of peace treaty with the Israelis, was assassinated during an annual victory parade. This guy named Khalid Ismaili stood up and sprayed. This guy was a lieutenant, by the way, in the Egyptian army. He stood up and sprayed Sadat with his Kalashnikov. So these, along with the next set of events that I'm going to talk about really paved this way for this Islamic golden era that I've been talking about. There's lots of press involved, lots of English-speaking press involved. The press was super involved with this Israeli-Egyptian peace treaty, and Jimmy Carter was there, and I'm sure he had something to do with fucking this all up. What happened is after this, like 300 of these Muslims, there were like Muslim Brotherhood guys and Egyptian jihadi guys, wasabiists. They got locked up from the assassination. They threw them all in like this one. You could see these videos and stuff. It's like this was just long wall, and they were all locked in there, and they were all just like leaning on the bars, like yelling and blah 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 blah, blahing at each other. But what you could see on that side of the wall is actually really telling, and it was the start of the blueprint of what we were talking about today. So we're gonna scooch in. We're gonna do a little bit of a commercial, and I'll be. So behind this wall of prisoners were Dr. Al-Zawahiri, and the Blind Sheikh. So there's lots of press. Dr. Al-Zawahiri isn't English speaking. He's actually a surgeon. And so he starts using, well, not only is he a surgeon, he's the future physician to Osama bin Laden and a co-founder of Al-Qaeda. So he's there. And there's this other character there that you need to know about, the Blind Sheikh. We're going to get back to the Blind Sheikh later. Dr. Al-Zawahiri, that's what it is. I got to do this. Al-Zawahiri, using his English, he's yelling at the press corps and he's screaming about establishing an Islamic State and yada yada yada, and he's like, "Who are we? We're Muslims. What do we want? To enslave people and kill infidels. When do we want it? We want it now." What do we want? We want to dress up like wizards. Well, when do we want it? We want it now. All right, so for this Islamic awakening, Palestine was untouchable. You start messing around with Palestine, that's when everyone starts getting jumpy, is what we're saying. So, in the assassination of Sadat, there were 5 death sentences. Al-Zawahiri is let go after 3 years in an Egyptian prison where he was tortured, and he wound up giving up a bunch of like underbosses that he had. So think about that. Think about being needled for 3 years. He got out. Also winds up. The Blind Sheikh also got out later. He got out because this was his brilliant defense when he got out in Egypt. They had a court and they were like, "But he's blind," and they were like, "Yeah, what's a blind guy gonna do?" And he's like, "Yeah, this guy's blind. I mean, what can he do? Like, he didn't kill the guy who was blind." And they were like, "I just feel like Norm Macdonald. He was blind. What's he going to do? He was blind." And they were like, "Yeah, that guy was blind." And so they let him out. Meanwhile, they let him out. This guy runs to like Jordan or some shit and then shows up in Brooklyn. It's fucking crazy. We're going to get to it. It's crazy. Just keep it in your head because we gotta keep track of this Blind Sheikh. And when I say he's blind, I mean he's blind. He looks like a fucking comic book villain. Like he wears like a Santa Claus hat and Blues Brothers sunglasses, And like the big, the big dry lips these guys got with their awful like their beards and stuff. And when you take the Jake Blues sunglasses off, he's just got like this one like marble looking eye that like rolls around dryly in its socket, and his other eye's like jack closed. So whatever, but he doesn't have a good story. Like when you talk about someone named the Blind Sheikh, like I would think he was like, he got his eyes blown up because he was trying to like assemble a dirty bomb, or he was like preaching so hard he went blind, or some shit, because they're all like there and they're like pounding their thing and they're like, but really this guy had type 2 diabetes and fucking went blind. That's all. 1984. I mean, it was childhood diabetes, whatever. I imagine they don't get too many Twinkies there in Egypt. 1984, Brooklyn. There's this thing called the Al Farouk Mosque. Now, whenever I hear this, the Al Farouk Mosque, I just think of the Nation of Domination. It was established and mainly used to radicalize Muslims to send to Afghanistan to jihad against the communists. Remember, this Soviet invasion or whatever is still happening. There is a recruitment tool for the Mujahideen. It was also there to raise funds for them. 1985. The Service Office, which was the overseers, it was the overseas operations and training for the Mujahideen, start receiving training aids. The training aids came in the form of translated U.S. Army and Special Operation Forces manuals. They found this dude, Sergeant Ali Mohammed, who was stationed in Fort Bragg, and he was supplying these guys with training materials from the JFK Special Warfare Center and school. Basically, this guy he was writing and inventing an encyclopedia of jihad in 1985. He was this was like basically what the dude that did the Anarchist Cookbook did. Like, he got together all these army manuals and stuff, and he started writing their doctrine. But he was translating it from English to Arabic and sending it, or Pashtun, something. I don't know what the fuck he was translating it to, but he was sending it. Now, this guy, Ali Mohammed, he was a sergeant at the time, but what you don't know is he enlisted when he was 34 years old, and you're like, what? That doesn't make any sense. And what doesn't even make any more sense is that he was a major of the special forces in Egypt. He was in the unit that killed Sadat. How does he find his way over? Nobody knows. Everyone's like, oh, it's like some kind of bureaucratic incompetence. And then you're like, well, how did he get to enroll in the army? Well, that was bureaucratic incompetence too. How did he get selected for special forces? Well, that was bureaucratic incompetence as well. And then it came out that this guy, like his direct military supervisors, would write memos to Army intelligence saying, hey, we think that we have a guy here that's leaking the stuff out, and his name is Ali Muhammad, and no one ever opened it up. And they're like, how do you think that all happened? And he goes, well, CIA, I guess. Here, this guy's unit commander would brief Army intelligence, and nothing would ever happen. He later said, I figured CIA ... Okay, so when you think about how much could it be teaching you, like what's this special forces operation stuff? So unconventional warfare, kidnapping, assassination, hijacking airplanes, but more than that, is he's instilling these ideas. And there's the 5 truths of special operation forces, and not all of these apply, but I'm going to say all of them just so you know. I'm telling you what they all are. Humans are more important than hardware. Quality is better than quantity. Special operation forces cannot be mass produced. competent special operation forces cannot be created after emergencies occur, and most special operations require non-special operation forces support. So you basically have, look at all these things. Humans are more important than hardware. You send a bunch of dudes in with like rolls of Tootsie Rolls or whatever that they were making, that they were their wooden TNT blocks and box cutters. Quality is better than quantity. They spent a long time picking out the right dudes to do this. They can't be mass produced. There's actually like a formula for these special forces, these JSOC guys, and it all has to do with how many people can actually not survive but withstand the selection process. It's something like, I want to say it's something like 15 to 20% that actually could do it. They have the mental toughness to do it. Competent special operation forces cannot be created after emergencies because they're designed to be the emergency. I don't know if that's true. I just fucking said that. And most special operation forces require non-special operation forces support. And that's true here, too. These guys had people to drive them to the fucking thing. They had people to take them to the strip club so they could see the preview of their 60 virgins or 70 virgins or whatever. They were there. So this is a gigantic part of the like this puzzle that's falling into place. On to page 4. Okay, so it turns out that this Ali Mohammed guy, Al-Zawahiri, ordered this dude to infiltrate the military, and he wound up applying to the FBI. He actually worked for the CIA for a while, and eventually he enlisted in the Army when he was 34, which is above Army standards, I believe, for the time. They weren't at war. It could be 40-something. Anyhow, whatever it is, it's late. Enlisted in the Army at 34 is late to enlist, especially as an enlisted man. When I went through, when I was in basic training, they had a big formation, and they were in background checks on you. Like, not just like, I'm going to run your name through LexisNexis or whatever. Because we were there, and they were like, someone's here. His dad was a general in Vietnam. Well, who's going to fess up for this? And like, we had a Vietnamese kid named Nguyen, I don't know how you pronounce it, but he was just like, yeah, I'm like the only Vietnamese kid here. It's me. So it's like, I don't know how they figure that out, but they do. Like, they can get in there and figure it out. So you're telling me they didn't figure this fucking guy's shit out? I don't know. It seems questionable to me. I mean, why did this guy take a pay grade decrease? He was a special forces major in Egypt? I don't know, bro. All right, so 1987 in Berlin, Reagan famously says, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." Around the same time, he authorizes sending Stinger missiles to the Mujahideen, creating what's called the Stinger effect, which means that these Mujahideens are shooting tanks and Soviet aircrafts with Stinger missiles. In 1989, the Soviets left Afghanistan. The Soviet Union soon crumbles, creating the post-Cold War era. The Mujahideen really felt like they won. And sometimes they sat around and they were like, look, man, we got all these great dudes. We got all these weapons, all these modern weapons. And we're pretty good fighters. There was sort of an infight about the question of what to do next. they could fight somewhere else. They could go to America. They could go home. More on this later. But when the Soviets left, America also left. We went. They were like, the mission is complete. We're leaving this. We're leaving this war machine to its own insanity. A lot of these guys thought that when the fighting was done, because in their view they were fighting sort of on behalf of America, they'd be given like houses and stuff. It's like My Blue Heaven. Like they would be given like farms or whatever, and they'd be able to like just come in and stuff. But from our point of view, we were like, we were also helping you out, and we just wanted the Soviets to take one in the face, take it to the face. And that's what happened when these guys left. America is also like, bye, see ya, is leaving a lot of refugee camps in the wake that we never ever repatriated and stuff. I'm not saying it was our point of view to do. It wasn't. I'm not saying we had to do it. I'm like, fuck, whatever. If they didn't want to be here, why are they here anyways? Get into writing first. Hey, if you're gonna join a guerrilla fighter unit, if you're gonna join a mujahideen, get your shit in writing what you want to get done, because that seems to be what is the coin of the realm. But the mujahideen really felt that they won. So back at the Al Farak Mosque in Brooklyn, law enforcement, this joint terrorism task force, are notified that this mosque is buying thousands of rounds of ammo for AK-47s a month. And they swooped in, and they would take pictures. These guys would go to this thing called the Calvert gun range. They'd send a bunch of, think of this nowadays. My gun range. Think of this nowadays. Truckload of Arab Muslims coming out and wanting to do training with shooting training with their AK-47s with like 2,000 rounds a month. So technically there was nothing wrong. All the weapons were properly licensed and stuff. So this went on, and then in 1990, one of these guys, El Sayir Nusar, attacks and shoots to death this firebrand of a rabbi, Rabbi Meir Kahane. And this guy spoke out against the Palestinian Muslims. He was also a founder of the Jewish Defensive League. That's not right. The Jewish Defense. He was a founder of the Jewish Defense League. The verdict came down as this guy was innocent of murder, and the judge was like, this verdict is against overwhelming weight of evidence. An overwhelming weight of evidence and devoid of common sense. Seems like the modern or the popular kind of thing was like, we don't believe that you guys ruled this way. But this guy, instead of going free, they just slapped him with like the biggest charges they could find for wielding a gun, for a gun charge. I think he was locked in there for like, I think it's like 7.5 years or something like this. All right, so in 1990, Saddam Hussein, who was a member of the Ba'athist Party, which actually has ties to the Nazis, and the Iraqi military invade Kuwait, and America went in to Desert Storm, Desert Shield, holding FDR's end of this preferential oil scheme up. Osama bin Laden met with the Saudis and offered them the muscle and the guns and the experience or whatever of the Mujahideen, or whatever they were being morphed into. So imagine this, like the fourth largest army in the world is invading Kuwait, And this guy shows up and is like, his little diaper and his funny hat, and he's like, "Why are you asking these foreign guys to come in to help you? Like, I'll bring my mujahideen over, and we could fight Iraq." And they were like, "Listen, homie, have you ever been inside of a tank? Like, this is the way it's gonna go." They didn't take him serious at all. Iraq had the fourth largest army in the world at the time, and they were like, they actually had some prestige they needed to hold on to, too. So, in this time, the Blind Sheikh appears in Brooklyn at Al Farouk Mosque. And how does this fucking guy get into the... Remember I told you this guy shows up? How does this fucking guy get into the country? Bureaucratic incompetence. Or is it a payment for a job well done? The problem with this is this growing Islamist golden era sort of thing is he lends credibility to these fuckers because he's a legit Islamic scholar. So law enforcement is all over this. They see connections everywhere. Al-Zawahiri is connected to the Sadat assassination. Ali Mohammed is connected to the Sadat assassination. The Blind Sheikh is also associated with the Sadat assassination and the Muslim Brotherhood and the Egyptian jihadist Wahhabist movement. All Ali Mohammed is connected to the special operations forces, which is linked to the Mujahideen. He was the guy who was like translating all of these manuals and the maps and stuff to Pushtun in Arabic to create the Encyclopedia of Jihad, they call it. AK-47 gun training at the Calvert gun range. Ali Mohammed was actually there. He was one of the training guys that was there. They hire a guy to infiltrate the Egyptian army, and he was there when Sadat bought the farm. He was actually an Egyptian army guy who was like, "You killed my president. I want to bury you." Okay. So Nosair, the guy who shot the rabbi, his uncle, it gets a little bit muddled. Just hang in with me. If you guys want a better examination of this, there was this 3-night thing on History Channel called Road to 9/11. There's actually this old ABC show called Path to 9/11, which covers a lot of this stuff. I just did a bunch of other research as well, or whatever. But so there's different ways you can find it. If I'm getting too ahead of you guys or crazy or whatever. All right. So when Sadat bought the farm, there was an army guy there who was like, "He's my president," whatever, and he wound up running to America. So the FBI brings this guy into the fold, and they put him at Nosair's court, like, because they're protesting. You know, all they fucking do is protest. So they're protesting, and then there's like Jewish people protesting on this side. So they put this guy in to protest on Nosair's side, and this guy, Nosair's uncle, El Jabroni, brings this guy kind of into the fold. And El Jabroni also travels to Pakistan to meet up with Osama bin Laden for funds for the defense. So here's where the spider's web starts to glisten. Like, this is where it's starting to get real tasty. And you can almost kind of see the shadow or like the blueprint of what we're going to be dealing with. So we have number 1, the finance, Osama bin Laden. We have number 2, the training, the Ali Muhammad. We have number 3, the Saudi connection, recruitment aspect because of because our military is still there after the Gulf War. This is Saudi Arabia is where the 19 hijackers are actually going to come from years later. Number 4, Islamist Wahhabist legitimacy because of the blind sheikh. So we're not going to stop just there, just yet. We're going to run a little bit long. So if you throw in Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, you have already the formula for some nasty business, some bad shit. But here we go. The FBI wants this inside guy to wear a wire. He doesn't want to wear a wire. He's like, if I wear a wire, I have to give my testimony. If I give my testimony, they can go to Egypt and cut my sister's head off. So he leaves. So when he left, they had no one to cook these bombs because he like sold himself as an army guy. So they're like, oh, you can build these bombs. He was going to build 12 pipe bombs. That's it. Just 12 pipe bombs. That's almost nothing. So, in his absence, a new player arrives. This guy named Ramzi Youssef. But he was like, I don't want to build 12 pipe bombs. I want to build one big bomb. On February 26, 1993, they drove a truck into the parking levels or the lower levels of the World Trade Center. Their plan was they were going to blow like the core of the building. They're going to blow the core of one building up and making it fall like timber. Like you can cut a tree a certain way to make it fall a certain way. That's what they wanted to do. They wanted to blow a notch into one of the towers to make it fall into and crush the other tower. But they didn't do it. So they were working off an idea that these buildings were built like normal buildings. However, they weren't. They weren't built with like a core structure. Like the World Trade Center, like they were built a couple, I don't know how many ever feet above whatever the Empire State Building was. In order to do that, what they did is they made the outside structure strong. And the core structure was, I don't want to say incidental. I don't want to say weak because, I mean, it was still there. But it, like when you looked at like the pylons and stuff, like down towards the bottom, like where the parking or whatever, the lower levels, the loading docks and stuff were concerned, up above what kept the buildings up was this sturdy outside shell, and that's what allowed them to raise so high. And that's why people, I mean, I'm not going to get into La La Land, but that's why when people look at this, they don't understand that it's a different kind of building than anyone's ever built before. And then I know, like, well, now they do because they're like, oh no, that's where they put the mini nuclear weapons that blow each floor off, or the explosives. Dudes, I've wired a bridge up for explosives, and I know that all right, anyhow. Like, the amount of deck cord, time fuse, the amount of shit that you have, duct tape, it's not just the fucking movies where you go and stick some silly putty on the shit. That does not exist. And then you're like, well, in the futuristic, secret black budget space program, it exists, and you just don't know what you're talking about. That's actually putty lightning or whatever. Okay, I'm a little bit long in my cups right now. I'm just trying to wrap this up. So where was I? Okay, so they got the VIN number. These FBI guys were like, hey, I think that's the axle down there. They were looking down the hole of like where this bomb went off. And they were like, I think that's the axle down there. And there's this secret VIN number hidden down on the axle. And I actually think this is something that happened in Oklahoma City too. I got to go back and look at it, but I think this is something that happened there. So they went and they found the VIN number. They ran it. It was a local rental place. So they called it and they were like, hey, we're looking for this thing. And they were like, it was just reported stolen. And the guy who rented it is actually trying to come back to pick up his deposit. And they were like, what? And he was like, yo, he's coming back here to pick up his deposit. And the guy was like, hold him there. So they went and they dressed up like the manager or whatever. And they wound up fucking nabbing this guy. They nabbed the fool. Ramzi Youssef, who was the bomb maker, winds up bolting, but Khalid Sheikh Mohammed found a bunch of his papers with his plots and his plans, and this swirling perfect storm would have plans of their own, training personnel, funds, and the chance to change the world. So, I'm John Towers. This has been the Ambercast, episode 50. I'd expect a few more of these, at least to pop up in the near future, so you can get through this. I know, like, my whole first season kind of thing, my first year, 9/11, I wanted to do the Vienna 1683, because I just written the book about it and I just wanted to like charge on. But I figure we're going to do some of this stuff first, like getting like some real world nonsense. So thanks for checking out the show. I love the fact that you guys are spending time listening to the show, and I would love to encourage you to support the show. There's a lot of ways to do that. One is to just simply do a rate and review on however you digest the show, especially iTunes. If you just want to like drop in, rate and review, especially if you give a good rate and review, that also helps me figure out what you guys want to hear, like what you're, whatever. Because I can only look in ascertain so much with the metrics that I have. So yeah, I'd love to get to know you guys more and know more about like the shows that you're interested in. So that's a great way to do that. Also share the show with your friends. If you're weird enough to like the show, then you probably know someone else who's weird enough to also like the show, and you can share show shit with them if you do that. So that's awesome. If you can, please buy some comic books. That's the best way to support the show. Because if you buy some comic books, I can get money to pay for all this technical stuff. Like I got like a whole studio here with things, microphones and stuff. So this is the best way to do this. For me, this is the best way to do it. If you don't want to support me, you just want to support the show, do all that other stuff. If you want to support me, let's buy some comic books, bro. Let's get into it. Let's trade some money, bro, because that's where it's at.
The Ages begins with the shocking story of Cain and Abel and the journey of violence and revenge spanning thousands of years, following Cain through his cursed life from an ancient invasion of malicious angels to the American Revolutionary War. A masterful, compelling journey through time, The Ages delves deep into arcane knowledge, myth, and legend. The art is stunning, and the story takes you on a journey where mortals, immortals, angels, and demons are all forced to deal with the folly that is God's creation. It's a beautifully dark and gritty ride through history. This 4-part story follows the astrological procession of the ages and how each 2,500-year age parallels major changes in the development of Earth's inhabitants. Cain's blasphemous struggle with the divine and sacred tyrant God will create and crumble empires, shape history, and cause a cosmic cataclysm.
But if you're like, I don't give a fuck about you, I just want to support the show, then yeah, those are some great ways to support the show. Sign on to the newsletter. There's a link in the show notes. Anyone that signs in the newsletter this week, I will go ahead and send you a digital copy of Revenged in a Saloon Called Hell, which is the first chapter of my next book called Rise of the Beasts. Do it, do it, do it. It's a great story, and I just want everyone to read it. I want you to read it. I want to hear what you have to say about it. So do it. StigmataStudios.com. You can find all kinds of comic books and nonsense there. If you're wondering, if you're like, God, this guy got me through this last hour or so of my shitty fucking cubicle life, what am I going to listen to next? I have the answer for you. Go to society-13.com. Try on Queens of NC-17. Try on Kettle Whistle Radio. Try on Prog Watch with the Prog Swatch. Try on The Lift and the Wicked Library. There's tons of great stuff. We got tons of great stuff there for you guys. Please try to check it out. And we're going to end this tonight. This is I want to dedicate this song to Osama bin Laden. It's called Cross Me Off Your List. It's from Soda Jerk. It's their album called Unhappy Hour. Thank you guys. Please come back. I think I'll have something new for you like right soon, very soon.
If I slit my wrists, would you cross me off your list of people you cannot miss? I just can't stop, I just can't resist. 'Cause I'm drunk enough to drive you home, but you keep telling me to go. Then you tell me to leave you alone. I guess it's just your way of saying no. Sometimes I get like this, 'cause I know how it feels to die every time the bottle hits my lips. If I cut out my own heart and send it to you with a card, would you tell me I've gone too far? Well, I guess I always fall this hard. 'Cause I'm like the last page of a book that says the end, 'cause that's how I look. Please, please, girl, please come to my funeral, 'cause you know it's my heart that you took. Sometimes I get like this, 'cause I know how it feels to die every time the bottle hits my lips. If I slit my wrist, would you cross me off your list?